Welcome to a new episode of the XR Magazine podcast. I am Diana Olenik, your host, and today we're going to be speaking about chemistry and scientific research in VR. Today we are speaking with Nanome, who is a virtual reality software company to launch an immersive real-time collaboration platform for scientific discovery and is changing the way we understand and interact with science at the molecular level. The software environment allows users to visualize, modify, and simulate proteins, chemical compounds, and nucleic acids to accelerate scientific decision making. The platform facilitates effective communication of data and integrates with existing computational chemistry workflows. Features that have led to the adoption of the San Diego based company's enterprise solution by several pharmaceutical and biotech companies worldwide. Today, we're going to be speaking with one of the co founders. His name is Keita. So, Keita's passion lies at the intersection of emerging technologies, digital arts, and sciences. He graduated from UC San Diego with a Bachelor of Sciences in Management Science, Quantitative Economics, and a minor in Visual Arts Digital Media. He co-founded Nanome in 2015 and now leads the company operations. I can't wait to hear more about this amazing platform. Let's do it. Thank you so much, Keita. I'm super excited to have you here today. How are you doing, by the way?
Super excited. How about you?
Oh, very good. Thank you so much for asking. Please let us know the beginnings of Nanome. I know it's super exciting to hear about this magnificent tool that is already out there for scientists, people that is in chemistry, biology. Please let us know how did this idea begin, and of course, all the development of the app.
Sure. So Nanome was founded during my senior year at UC San Diego. And so we have 4 co-founders, myself, Steve, Edgardo, and Sam. And so my background is a kind of a mix between digital media, computer science, and economics. And Steve's background is in what's called nanoengineering. And so when I actually first experienced the Google Cardboard in 2014, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I need to be involved with, XR, VR, right? And I had met Steve. And back then, the only, apps that were available were, roller coaster games and zombie shooters and things like that. And I wasn't really interested in kind of, video games. And so when I met Steve, he was like, yeah, I'm trying to do nanoengineering or molecules in chemistry and science in virtual reality. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is totally, what the future, of science ought to look like. And, I grew up watching Iron Man and Tony Stark and the futuristic ways of interacting with scientific data. And I totally thought this has to be the way. And so we started this company together. Sam is our CTO and Edgardo is our Chief Experience Officer. And we were all pretty much not exactly classmates. We didn't take the same classes, but we were all peers and we had a bunch of different friends and we were all really into science and virtual reality. And so we started that company in 2015, 2016. And we fully spun out of UC San Diego's campus in 2019. And now we have, over half of the top 20 pharma companies as our customers who actually use VR and our software to, make breakthroughs in science and molecular design. So that's kind of a quick summary.
Wow, thank you so much. It sounds pretty exciting that it was all familiar for you because you were, friends around and you were developing the project as also you were improving your professional skills, etc. So that sounds like a very organic evolvement of the app. So thank you so much for giving that intro. So in terms of the conception of the idea, now we have the clarity about that. How about starting to build it out? Did you get additional developers? Did you do it yourselves? And how did you design? Because when we take a look at Nanome, we can realize that to build an infrastructure like that might be complex. So what is the background of that process?
Definitely. Well, so, very, very early on, Steve, myself, Edgardo, Sam, we all built different prototypes. I do have a little bit of a programming background in computer science, but, I'm not a graphics expert or a computational chemistry expert by any means. But we were able to put together enough prototypes such that then we could, convince others, right? We were able to get different advisors from UC San Diego, and professors and such. What we also did was we also got a ton of different basically interns from the computer science department to help us out because as everybody knows, I'm sure your audience knows, developing for virtual reality is much harder than making a website or iOS app, right, or on mobile. And so and everybody was trying to learn, right, and so there wasn't really common practice, and so it was a lot of different experimentations. So back in the day, we had a lot of different interns and basically colleagues that helped us make a lot of different types of prototypes. And then what was critical is that after we got these prototypes, one of the people that we were able to convince was Novartis, which is one of the big pharma companies in the world. And Novartis was actually practically across the street from our campus at UC San Diego. And so we went to their campus and they were like, this is an amazing technology. We also think that this could actually make an impact, towards research, scientific research, and developing new drugs and things like that. And so we started our collaboration with Novartis in 2017, and every 2 weeks we went to their campus and we got feedback. How about this? What do you like this menu? What feature do you want? Right? What sort of things? And they would be like, oh, hey, there's this bug makes it scientifically inaccurate, so you really got to fix this bug, right? All these types of things that we were so valuable to learn, so that then we could actually make a platform that was useful and accurate for scientific use. And so that collaboration, Novartis is actually one of our biggest customers and users today because of that collaboration, right? So and then beyond that, really, we made a kind of agile software development. We had a new version out every 2 weeks, and we put together a team. And in the same year after that, or after that collaboration was initially formed, we were able to get some venture funding in 2017, where we were able to put together a more robust, not just interns, but full-fledged development team of full-time developers. That's pretty much kind of how we approach the development of the platform.
That sounds pretty exciting, because what makes me super, super happy about the process that you did is that the customer was pretty much with you building at the same time the app, this is the ideal scenario where it's the co-creation at the same time. Thank you. So what was the most technically challenging aspect to build?
Oh man, choosing one technically is very choosing one is really hard. So can I cheat and say three things that were hard? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm glad you're allowing me to cheat. So I think the number one thing is that these scientific simulation and calculation of molecules is a very, 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 not only is it a hard thing to do, depending on what type of scientists you talk to, they have a different preference on what kind of a back-end simulation algorithm they prefer. The metaphor I would come up with is that if you're developing, it's kind of like when you're developing a Microsoft Word, right? The grammar for English and French and Spanish and Japanese, they're all different, right? And so you need to make sure that the back-end correction mechanism to make sure, yes, this is correct spelling for English, but this is incorrect spelling for Spanish, and things like that, right, is basically kind of like that, right? And so making sure that we're scientifically accurate, but we're also flexible to be able to adapt and to be applicable to these different types of scientific use cases, I would say was probably a really, really big challenge. And so the way we kind of address that is to come up with a flexible Python API. So we have a very robust and extensive plugin system where, if the joke is not really a joke, but it's true, which is that, you ask the top 10 pharma customers or the pharma scientists what type of simulation algorithm they prefer. They'll give you 10 different answers, right? And so our Python API and a plugin system allows us to plug into their existing simulation solutions without, but while still using VR and XR as an interface to be able to set up and analyze those simulations. And then so the second thing I would say was the live collaboration. So, and I'm sure some of your audience might be familiar with this, but we use Photon for our collaboration, live collaboration and multi-user aspect. But Photon is very much developed for gaming. And so in gaming, it's really important that, like everything is live synced, and that like, when one person, I guess like shoots another person, like in a, shooting game, right? Then they see the other person seeing actually that. But the needs for within molecular, like a productivity app and collaboration are different, right? Where, if there is a network lag, then you don't want everything to stop and for everything to catch up. Like, in Zoom, for instance, the video stops and you could still hear the other person, right? In the video game, if that were to happen, then the video game doesn't work. So that's why you need to implement that delay such that then everything is synced up, quote unquote, all the time. But for us, it's like if the connection is bad, we don't want to drop, we don't want to drop everybody and prevent everybody from talking to each other. We want to still enable the audio, for instance, such that they can still, collaborate, right? And so it's like there were a lot of things like that. And that's just one example. And I'm not technical enough to be able to point to many different examples, but, from what I know, there's many things like that essentially we needed to kind of build on top of and modify, the existing infrastructure of Photon to be able to be more productivity focused rather than kind of gaming focused. And then the third thing is just like, I think this is more on the user experience and user interface side of things, is that, like, what does it actually like look like to have a native 3D app for molecular interaction? Is just like nobody knows, right? Like nobody has, built like a molecular editing tool that's natively in 3D, right? And so, and this is something we're still tackling, right? We still don't know, do chemists prefer to drag out a molecule from their left hand to the environment? Do they prefer to just scroll and then click, like a mouse, basically, right? And so these things, I think, as a lot of trial and error, giving it to the users, getting feedback, right? Things like that. And frankly, taking a lot of inspiration from different VR games and apps, right? Are currently like our molecular drawing tool, so you can like draw molecules. That's heavily inspired by Tilt Brush, right? The painting tool in VR, right? And so it's, one of the things that we like to say is like, hey, you can have Tilt Brush, but for molecules. So instead of painting, right? Painting with a color or whatever in 3D, you're painting with carbon atom and an oxygen atom, or, things like that, right? And so, it's still very much a hard solution that we don't have the perfect answer for, and we're actively learning. But I would say those kind of three things were the biggest challenges.
Yeah, sounds super, super interesting. And thank you so much for expanding, not just in one, but in the other one, just to have a little bit more of perspective and background of what are the typical, roadblocks that can be faced there when building something of this with this kind of infrastructure. And especially also that this is not a project that started recently, but it's been years and years evolving. So it's interesting. Thank you. And I think that you have had some interesting cases of use of Nanome. I wonder if you want to mention a couple of them. One of them that I am aware of is using it even for research with coronavirus, like to analyze the protein structures and all of this. What examples would you like to bring that are interesting on how they are using it?
Yeah, so many. In fact, if we have a whole case study page on our website. So if you go to nanome.ai/case studies, then you can look at all the different case studies we have. As you mentioned, probably the most kind of famous one is coronavirus, right? What's interesting is that we've had different researchers use Nanome and VR and XR for coronavirus research in different ways. And so one of them is Oak Ridge National Labs has actually made a novel chemical compound. So basically, it's a new chemical design to attack the protease of the coronavirus. So the just a quick explanation: the protease of the coronavirus is basically what causes all the destruction within your body, and so people have probably seen like the spike protein and the protease, probably the two biggest kind of most famous structures. And so the Oak Ridge National Labs, they made a potential drug that could attack the protease of the coronavirus to be able to. So it's not a vaccine, but it's an antiviral compound that you take after you get coronavirus, such that you don't get the symptoms as bad, or hopefully you don't die because of it. And so they're progressing with further clinical trials. So that's a big one. Another one with Novartis is, unfortunately I can't disclose the exact the details, but they were basically looking at the coronavirus as well, in different ways to be able to hopefully make a positive impact in patient lives, with the virtual reality and Nanome technology. And then lastly is there was an Italian pharmaceutical company called Dompe Pharmaceuticals that looked at very, very large simulations of the coronavirus and how it interacts with the human body. And so they were able to analyze those results in Nanome and in VR. And so those are just some of the examples. One other thing that I would mention is the Nimbus Therapeutics case study. I can't recall what exactly the therapeutic area was, meaning like what disease it was and things like that. But basically, they realized because of Nanome and VR that they were about to make a mistake in the way that they were making a drug. But then they looked at like the proposal essentially in VR, and then they're like, oh my gosh, like we need to go a different way. And so they were hopefully, we don't know, obviously, if they went forward with that proposal, what kind of effects would it had, right? All that stuff. Hopefully it wouldn't have had too much of a bad example, but it could have gotten really bad where, adverse effects, side effects, things like that, right? And so because of VR and Nanome, they were able to realize that and prevent that from happening, right? So those are, in fact, that case study was done in conjunction with Oculus. So that's also on the Oculus website as well. So anyways, those are just some of the examples.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Are there other type of unexpected, maybe initial use cases that you thought of using the app right now? For example, schools, when they are taking their biology classes and chemistry. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we always thought that like schools will definitely be a big part in terms of use cases. At the very bit, I was telling you earlier about like the tilt brush for molecules, right? You've probably seen like the ball and stick models for chemistry in schools. But I like to say in VR, you never run out of parts, right? And so a lot of schools, and we're on the, you could download Nanome on for Quest and Steam VR and things like that. And so we have a lot of universities, over 250 universities and schools that have downloaded Nanome. And in fact, we have a case study that we published with Harvard on intermediate chemistry learning using Nanome. So definitely some kind of proof points there. I would say the unexpected, but I wouldn't say this is unexpected, but like one of the cool things that we're starting to say, because this is the thing that we wanted to happen. So I don't think that it was unexpected, but I guess it was somewhat unexpected that it was happening this soon, is that one of our customers said that they're now starting to use Nanome more than Zoom for their meetings, because they're constantly bringing up, scientific data and these, the chemistry models and things like that. So they're like, hey, like, why don't we just use Nanome, right? And so, now they have more of their meetings in Nanome for these scientists than in Zoom.
Wow, that's amazing. And what type of capabilities are there embedded like in the app or features that you created for that purpose in terms of the meeting per se, like the collaboration?
Yeah, for like the meeting specific. Yeah, so it's always actually a challenge for us as developers not to make too many kind of like meeting focus or general collaboration, because we know that there's apps like spatial and, Horizon workrooms and like, other solutions that are meant for more general meetings. And again, our specialties in science and molecules. So we try to stay within that as much as possible. But sometimes our users are like, oh my God, please add this. And we're like, all right, well, I guess we'll have to make it, right? So I would say there's kind of four different, three. I'll stick to three main features for this. One is the in-app web browser. So we have a shareable in-app web browser, and so it's different from a lot of different, Horizon Workrooms, I think, has a web browser, or like the Quest, you can just have a web browser. It's different from that because it's multi-user, so you can share the web browser and other people can see it. And then the other thing is that you can actually have deep linking with the molecular data that's in there. So a lot of scientists, they have web apps, right, for their scientific workflow. And so whatever you do in the web app, you can actually have it reflected in the 3D space in VR. And so that's kind of a unique thing about that. But at the same time, scientists use it to just like listen to music on Spotify and like watch YouTube, right? So you could totally use it for that too, right? And then the second thing is just a very general whiteboard tool. So you could just jot down notes, things like that, right? And then the third thing is, I believe we're one of the few apps that have done something like this, and I truly think this is a revolutionary feature, which is called spatial recording. And so spatial recording, it's like, if you watch Star Wars, the first original movie, there's that scene where Leia's like, Luke, you're my only hope, right? And there's like a hologram and there's a recording of it, right? It's kind of like that, except you can pause it. And so you can say, hey, Diana, check out this molecule, here you go, in the recording. And of course, the recording will just stop, right? But then it'll be in. But with spatial recording, and what's so powerful is that you can pause my recording. So I'll just be like this, and you could grab the molecule, and interact with it and change it and all that, right? And then if you press play, it'll go back, right? And then it will keep playing. And it's really, it's quite difficult to explain, right? Like through a conversation, but you really need to try it. And so the amazing thing about this is that we have, especially with like these bigger pharma companies, like they have research sites in Europe and North America and Asia. And so a lot of times, and if you've tried to ever schedule a call between, Europe, West Coast and Asia, it's almost impossible. Somebody needs to be awake at an uncomfortable time, right? But with this feature, you can do what's called like asynchronous, collaboration, where a researcher can say, hey, this is what I did, here were my findings, here you go, right? And then you don't need to meet, in a live session, right? Because then you could just pass on that recording and then take over from there, right? And then another thing that's really amazing is education and lecture recording, right? So, a professor can say, okay, this is why, cells like to, or like hemoglobin carries oxygen or whatever, right? And then in a student, if they don't understand it, they could pause it and be like, okay, why is that, right? And I could, reach in, grab it, like be able to manipulate it in a more natural way, and then hopefully understand that concept, right? So there's many different use cases to spatial recording. It's one of the biggest features that we're really, really proud of. And I think we've seen a couple other apps implement a similar thing, but not to the extent of that interactivity that we have, especially when it comes to obviously molecular data, right? So, anyways, those are kind of the three collaborative features.
I'm so glad I asked that question. Otherwise, we wouldn't know about that particular feature. But of course, what we're going to do is that we're going to do a video using that feature, and we're going to share it all around Antalya, because that sounds like, I also get excited when all of these kind of futuristic movies and these type of tools come to life now. People think that is in maybe after many more years, but it's right now, it's here. So I'm excited about that. And just like to quickly wrap up here, what was the most difficult challenge to implement that very feature that you're saying, the spatial audio? Like, because there is a reason maybe why not many other apps are doing it, but what was, whatever you can share, So
the feature, just to make sure, is called spatial recording. The most challenging thing, I think, there's so many things that's very challenging, because essentially, trying to understand, right, like how the making sure that the entire workspace doesn't get messed up after people go into the interact mode, making sure, because everything is interactable, the menus, the web browser, or like all these things, right? So making sure every part, and frankly, like when we started it, like it was very, I think like one of the things, I guess from my point of view that was difficult is like, we saw how much potential this feature could get very, very early on, but it had a lot of bugs, right? So because so many things could go wrong, right? So I think that making sure that we eliminate those bugs, while also keeping the magic, right? Is I think and flexibility, I think, is definitely one of the biggest challenges. Another quick thing is that we just integrated the meta avatars for and so you can do spatial recording with meta avatars. And the meta avatars API had just like a lot of different like limitations and requirements. And so integrating the meta avatars with the spatial recording was another very, very huge challenge.
Oh, interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. So much kindness of you, like sharing all your process, the background. We always say that it's so nice that when somebody goes and interact with the app, they see there the name of the app, Nanome, but nobody knows the behind the scenes of that, all the work that is involved, the people, the faces of all the team. So that's why this is a huge opportunity to bring that alive, or the human aspect of all of those amazing tools that are out there. So thank you so much for making this time and sharing all of this with us.
Thanks for having me.
Is there anything else that you wish I had asked you today?
No, I mean, I think, just because this is an XR focused podcast and maybe some of our developers might hear it too. So just a quick shout out to all of, the amazing developers that have actually made this happen, right? Like Ethan, Jackie, Kai, Edward, Jeremy, like Vincent back in the day. I mean, there's so many people that have been involved to actually make this happen. Our illustrator, Ben, has been with us for such a long time as well. And so, everybody's really passionate about how this is what science has to be like, right? So very, very proud of the team.
Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that as well. I'm pretty sure that everybody appreciates to have this type of gratefulness moments where everybody recognizes all the work. And we also, through doing this type of events, etc., we also want to celebrate, the apps and all the work and mentioning the teams, etc. So I'm super excited. Thank you so much. And it's been such a great talk. I'm inviting anybody to download Nanome to give a try, or recommend it to your family or friends, whoever are in the field that you feel that might be interested, and also follow them on social media. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode. Bye for now.